I did it again. Like, comment, subscribe, do all you can to be here next week. And then next week comes, and there's no new video. This life thing sucks. It keeps getting in the way, but you know what? I have priorities. We all have priorities, and my priority right now is to get this video out. Video number 2, albeit 2 weeks behind, but still, I'm getting it out there for everybody. And it is my second part of this build on the Campbell grandma's house. Not really much for this week, just painting and, you know, doing some reconfiguring with the bay windows and how those are built out. I'll explain it a little later, but in the meantime, let's just go ahead and get this over with. Let's get started. Between this and the last video, I got the other 5 parts of the bay windows completed. You didn't really need to see that 6 times over. Also, I did some spray painting, priming all the plastic parts. So instead of using masking tape on the paint sticks here, I actually used the double-sided tape I normally use for my roofs and put that on both sides of one paint stick at least and one side of the other. And that worked a whole lot better and everything seemed to stay in place. Now I'm going to paint these kind of a antique white color. It's an off-white that I think really goes well with this idea I have for the model. And it's the general trim color that I chose for this model. So using the stippling method with the paint brush, I'm just going to work the paint into all the cracks and crevices and get that all covered as best I can. The stick I'm painting now has plastic parts on both sides. I mean, there's a heck of a lot of windows attached to this house. Now this is a part I knew that the masking tape would not be sticky enough for, so that's why I decided to use the double-sided tape. And that was to paint the pillars and the railings for the eventual deck, and also all the other parts on that particular stick as well. I have no idea why I painted the top. Ain't nobody gonna see that. Now taking care of the other side of that 2-sided paint stick, painting all the parts on that. Now it's time to move on to the wooden joints that put all the walls together. Now in my last attempt here, I made everything a solid color, mainly because that's the only thing I could see from actual color pictures of this particular model. All the walls, including the trim outside of the windows, were all solid. But this time I'm going to make these joining pieces white, the same color as the windows and all the other pieces. That grouping of wood right there are all the angled joint pieces used to make the bay windows. The bane of my existence the last time I made this model. And so I'm going to go through and paint these that off-white color as well. One thing I did notice is that the wood, once you put the paint on it, did seem a little rough, so I decided to take some sanding paper and smooth it out a little bit before trying to paint any more. And that seemed to help really well with what I was trying to accomplish here. And all the other pieces after a good sanding looked really good after the fact. And now I'm painting the corner trim that joins 2 wall pieces together, both on the inside and the outside. The windows and doors are die cut in this kit, and because of that the vertical lines were hard to pick out, and I cut this particular window too long so that there was a 2 siding gap at the bottom of the window. Thankfully, the window above that was cut just fine. Thankfully, I kept all the pieces that I cut out and tried to find the one that I used for that particular window. I think I have one right here, and thankfully, first try, I found the piece that I cut out. I line up the piece with the window to make sure that it is 2 strips worth that I left off, and it is, so I cut that off and set that in the window to make sure that it is right with the window in place and everything looks good. All that's left is to dab a little glue on it and set it back into the window and cover it with a bunch of paint after the fact. You have to be mindful of these Campbell kits and the clapboard because the boards will have little slivers of wood that are barely hanging on to the ends of the clapboard wood planking. And you have to use various methods to get those off of there. I'm using a pick here, using a sanding stick to sand it off that way. Just trying to get the sliver off of there as best you can before you actually paint the model itself. Even running your thumb over it may be enough to get those slivers off. Baby blue, sky blue is my color of choice here. That's what I wanted to use originally, but for some strange reason I had a brain fart and decided, you know what, teal would look great on this house. And so that was then. This is now. I'm using sky blue, baby blue paint, and it's really thin, so I had to apply multiple coats in order to get full coverage. If I had aged this wood in any way, shape, or form, it would have shown through on that first coat, and that might have been good for, you know, another model, but for this one I wanted to keep it nice and clean. Nice clean paint because Grandma's house is clean. And now here's all the parts and pieces colored and painted the way that I want them. The trim pieces on the side, the trim for the walls themselves, and all the walls. Despite all that work, something doesn't sit right, and it has to do with those bay window sides. The strip wood, it just doesn't fit. I mean, you have flat strip wood, you have clapboard, flat strip wood, clapboard. It's not a good combination. Even the picture on the box doesn't show that. So I decided I was going to use the spare parts that I used for the windows to cut those out and find some pieces that were the right size for me to supplement for that strip wood that ended up being the joining pieces of that bay window. So I found one that was the proper size and decided to use an X-Acto knife to cut it up. But I figured this would be a tedious process. So what do? I get all excited. I've got to get the chopper. Yes, where I get that chopper, the best thing out there. Line it up with the piece that I want. Make sure I have that plate in place to keep it in track. And then just slide that clapboard in and cut it to the size I want. It took a bit of trial and error to get this piece the right width. The first try didn't go, so I had to move the plate over just a hair and try again to see if that worked. Now the piece is still too wide here, so I decided to take the strip wood itself, put it between the blade and the plate, and measure it out that way. And that was a much better result. I only cut out 4 here because I wanted to do a proof of concept first before I did this to the other 5 side bay windows. And to do that I had to snap off the clapboard from the strip wood on just one of the side bay windows. And normally I would use this parchment paper right here, but hey, guess what? I still didn't get any more of that doggone parchment paper. So I decided I was going to use the same method I used before. Glue stick glue on top of the outline, serving as a buffer between the paper and the wood glue. I promise I have wax paper and I'll use that in the future. And coincidentally my son actually picked it out just randomly. He reached his hand out of the cart, picked something off the shelf, and it was wax paper. I'm like, son, thank you. So with this, I decided to test fit one of the windows that would go into this side part of the bay window. It's a little snug still, but I think I'm going to sand down the edges of the bay window as opposed to the window itself. And here's the completed unpainted piece. You can't really see the clapboard too well here, but once that paint gets on there, it'll be a lot easier to see. To finish up the proof of concept, I need to paint this the color of the rest of the walls, that sky blue color. And of course this takes a couple tries because the paint's so thin. And here's the finished window. You can really see the clapboard edges on this one really well. And now I'm going to propagate this 5 times over, but you won't see that. So a little light on content this week, but that's okay. Next week it's going to all come together, literally, because I'm going to start to put the whole building together, get all the pieces assembled for the main wall structure at least, and maybe go into some other bits and pieces with the model. Just all depends on how much I get done this week, but nevertheless, like, comment, subscribe, and do all you can to be here hopefully next week for the third part of this Grandma's House build. Until then, see you next time.